I'm here for pro-choice for masks. My name is Greg Labat. I've got 2 young kids in Palm Beach County School going into 1st grade and 3rd grade, and they hate masks just as much as me. So I just wanted to come here and personally tell you guys again, because it's like the 2nd time I've had to do this, and it's really boring. Barbara, you can't tell my kids to wear a mask anymore. Who else is here? Alexandria, you can't tell my kids. Where are you, Alexandria? You never listen. Look at her. She's right there with the pink cup. She's not even looking. Alexandria.
Sir,
sup?
go ahead.
Sup?
Just continue
How come
speaking.
she don't listen, and every time I come up here, she don't listen, man? Alexandria, you can't tell my kids that they can wear masks anymore. Karen, you can't tell my kids that they have to wear masks anymore. Erica, you can't tell my kids to wear masks anymore. Frank, you can't tell my kids to wear masks anymore. Marcia, you can't tell my kids to wear masks anymore. Deborah, you can't tell my kids to wear masks anymore. And Donald, you can't tell my kid to wear masks anymore. And all these people in the green shirts over here, y'all can't tell me or my kids to wear masks anymore. It's ridiculous. We need to know now, like today or soon, whether or not we're going to need to wear masks or not, because we're going to pull our kids out of the school. I'm sure there's a lot of parents just like me. We're going to pull the kids out of the school. We're going to start homeschooling. My wife is a teacher in Palm Beach County. She's going to quit if you guys force her to wear masks. So how many other teachers are going to quit? And then how the heck are you guys going to find enough teachers to replace the people who quit because of your bad decision making in time for the school year to start? So it's really important that you guys make a decision on whether or not you're going to change your mind, because you're going to lose not half, I'm sure there's less than half going to pull our kids out of school. How many teachers are going to quit? Who are you going to replace those super qualified, amazing teachers with? Are you going to replace them with less qualified teachers who are willing to listen to whatever you want to tell them to do and dictate their lives? Alexandra's still not listening. That's a serious question. I'm not joking. I will seriously pull my kids out. And what are you going to do with the teachers that quit? So then when we quit and when we pull our kids out of school, we're going to homeschool them. And we're going to teach them about everything that you have done. We're going to teach them about being strong American patriots. We're going to teach them about being good citizens of America. And we're going to teach them like the opposite of what you're teaching them now with all this CRT and anti-American mumbo-jumbo. It's really great to hear that Dr. Fenoy, with all due respect, man, you seem like a pretty cool dude. But it's kind of awesome that you're leaving, because everything was horrible for the last 2 years. So shout out to you, man. And just, F around and find out. Like, you want to put masks on the kids around again, and let's see what happens. Y'all have a good night. Thank you.
Josie Makovec, Sean Barnes, Cynthia Taylor, and Dagmara Ragone.
Good evening. This is Josie Makovic. And contrary to what someone stated, we actually all do have a lot of other things to do other than be here on a regular basis. Many of us have found babysitters, have taken time off of work. We're here because we're concerned about our children and the future of our county.
What's your name, ma'am?
I said my name is Josie Makovic.
Thank you.
So can y'all hear me? I feel like, okay. All right, so Mr. Barbieri, last meeting you stated that you get so much conflicting information, the different reports, it's really hard to know what to believe. Well, I'll make it really easy for you. Your responsibility is not to decide what to believe for me and my children. Your responsibility is to decide curriculums and manage the school district when it comes to my children's education. Oh, and I do have 3 children, for someone who stated that they think that we're just all showing up without kids. I have 3 kids, school-age children. And so just to make it simple, my children and I get to decide, my husband and I get to decide what is best for our children. And then on top of that, I see that there's this really interesting trend to insult parents like me who do a lot of research, who ask a lot of questions. As someone else stated, I've been called all kinds of names to my face, in the paper, on social media, for the last 20 months. Simply because I question things, which is what we are supposed to do as responsible parents. And I find it incredibly hypocritical that we are told that we are being bullies and that our opinions don't matter as much because they conflict with other people's opinions. And so I would ask you to put the noise aside. We're not noisy parents. We're parents who are bringing our questions and our concerns to the board for the future of our children. And so I would ask you to just step the noise aside and go back to what we've elected you to do, which, as I stated before, is to decide curriculums and manage the school district when it comes to our children's education and not their health. The reason that that study from JAMA was retracted wasn't because there was conflicting science to take it down. It was because some people didn't like what the science said. So instead of actually doing a study on how masks work with children and how they impact children, they just pulled the study down. So I would question that. That's basic science, is when there's a conflicting opinion, you do a study and you find out why. That wasn't done, it's just retracted, and we're told, don't look at that information, it's wrong. That doesn't sit well with me. That's not how I was educated when it came to my science learning. You know, we have hypotheses, have questions, and so on and so forth. And so the last thing that I want to say is, last time I was here, I stated that we're coming for your jobs. It was stated earlier that we are. 4 of you are up for re-election next year. Next year's redistricting, so all of you are going to have the opportunity to make the case for why we should keep you in your positions. And the decisions that you make tonight will go a long way to helping the people decide if you have our best interest at heart and if you don't. So I suggest you choose wisely.
Good evening. My name is Sean Barnes. I have 3 small children, one of which is in the Palm Beach County School District, 2 of which that are coming right down the pipeline. I'll second the notion from the previous speaker. I do not have a lot of time. As I just heard, I have 3 small children, a full-time job, and I do my darndest to do my best to work hard, to put the food on the table, the clothes on my kids' backs, to teach my kids right from wrong, please and thank yous, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, all the things that as parents we strive to make our children better visions of what we are. By you guys mandating the masks, you are taking that liberty away from me as a father. This is my first time here. I don't have a ton of time, but I will fight for my child. I know this is the last time that you guys are meeting before you make the decision. The decision needs to be made. Just like the others, I will pull my child out of Palm Beach County School. I will not put my other 2 children in Palm Beach County schools if this is what's going to go on. It is not fair. I do appreciate the kids or the parents that have kids that have, disabilities or different, ailments that cause COVID-19 to be detrimental to them. But again, wear a mask. There are other options. We cannot make the 1% the majority. The majority is that our kids are healthy and they need to see their friends smile and their friends cry and they need to see being happy and sad.
I can't breathe. What happened? I can't breathe.
We need our kids to breathe. We just need our children to be children. It is so important for their mental stability. My child, I see it first. He is the happiest, go-luckiest kid you'll ever meet in your life. And this past year has changed him. Luckily, with summer and him being home and not having to wear masks, he has changed and got back to the kid that we love and that we know he is. But the ability or the lack thereof for him to see his friends' expressions and to know when to show compassion and to know when to cry with them or when to tell the teacher that they're being mean, with that ability taken from them by wearing these things over their faces, it has changed their mental well-being. And as parents, not only do we have to worry about their physical well-being, whether they get sick or not, we have to worry about their mental well-being. That is the most important thing. These children are our future, and if we ruin them now, there is no coming back. So I hope all of you with children who can appreciate where I'm coming from. I don't have a political agenda. I don't have Facebook or Twitter or read any politically driven magazines or nothing. I have life experiences, and I know in my own life experiences that my children are not affected by COVID-19. So I hope you do what's right and just take the masks off, because I would love nothing more to send my 3 children to a Palm Beach County school. But I am willing, and I will take them out if you choose not to. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Good evening to the comrades on the school board. Fascists wannabe. This is Dagmar Aragoni, Palm Beach County. Karen Bill, you are lying saying you are listening to all mama and papa bears. You actually doing exactly opposite. to the blonde woman who called us uneducated, I have 5 colleges from 3 countries. You based your speech on a false propaganda media. Talking about basing your speeches on a false propaganda media instead of facts does not make you educated. This is why they have blonde jokes. You are a perfect example of it. You are a brainwashed sheep. News report that there is a lot of disinformation about the virus and vaccination. Facts. In 2003, US patent was assigned to the SARS virus on the nucleic acid sequence of the SARS-CoV genomes. There are 3 patents to this. One on a disease, one for the detection kit, and one for the ways to measure it. A patent means no one else can look at the virus, measure it, and develop the testing for it. That is why we have seen no proof of the virus. Patents exclude competition since the virus is proprietary or protected intellectual property. According to David Martin, a medical doctor, a PhD, and a spokesperson for a global intellectual property accountability and quality reform, he reports that CDC, a non-governmental agency, and Dr. Ralph Baric from University of North Carolina, from the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, among others, we're at the hub of developing the virus. And yet, the Wuhan is in it, from pathogen to profit during 2003 to 2018. And the patent is owned by CDC. Just follow the science and the money. The question to the commies on the board: how much did you take to sell the safety and the well-being of these children in this county? How much did you take? Why did you do it? 3 vaccines are approved only for emergency use and authorization. This is experimental injection causing heart inflammation, blood clots, nervous system damage, and deaths. Currently, mRNA vaccination is considered a gene therapy by FDA. Stop your fascism. Step down. You're committing crimes against humanity.
Time's up, ma'am. Time's up. Cynthia Taylor? Elizabeth Murray, Michelle Mitchell, Julie Damsker. Any of you here?
I'm Elizabeth, I already spoke, thank
I
you.
can't hear you.
I'm Elizabeth Murray, I already spoke.
Okay, thank you. Board members, that's the end of the public, Allison Rampersad is a non-agenda speaker. We normally would take those at the end, but since she's the only one we didn't get to, we'll take her at this point. Ms. Rampersad, please come up to the podium.
I'm here. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Here I am again. This time I'm talking about something different. Parents, listen up. The Federal Department of Education was created under President Jimmy Carter in 1979, and from that day, the quality of education in the United States is on the decline. I might add that nowhere in the United States Constitution is the federal government authorized to establish an educational curriculum, to dictate how it will be taught, or to mandate how education will be evaluated. U.S. News and World Report released the following national proficiency stats from their best high school report. U.S. News calculates these values based on student performance on state exit exams and college-level coursework like the AP and the IB exams. And the schools must test 95% of the students. Florida, on the other hand, uses its own self-serving proprietary system for grading high schools. So parents, when you hear the school board or even the governor rave about how Florida schools are doing so well, let's take a look. Academic year 2016-17, Palm Beach County High School students ranked as follows. Reading proficiency, 48%. Math proficiency, 40%. College readiness, 35%. Academic year 2017-2018, reading, 49%. Math, 43%. College readiness, 33%. And the most recent academic year, 2019, that we have, reading 53%, math 47%, college readiness 28%. Now, are you ready? Live and direct from the Florida Department of Education's website, the Florida Schools Grading Scale. F, 31% or less. D, 32 to 40%. C, 41 to 50%, 53%, sorry. B, 54 to 61%, and A, 62% or greater. Unacceptable. 62% is an A? Are you kidding me? There is an obvious disconnect here. Florida's proprietary formula grades on the low curve so that the school grades can be made to look much better than they actually are. So parents, do not take it at face value when your school claims to be an A school. Look at the U.S. News and World Report data and see if it supports the claim. We need to know the true academic performance of Florida schools. And we need to move away from the highly manipulated Florida Department of Education proprietary grading system if we are going to effectively judge the efficiency of Florida schools.
Board members, the next item on the agenda would be consent, to approve the consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull anything? I pulled P1, so if you would all refresh your computers, it'll move under new business. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Mrs. McQuinn. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That'll take us to B2, Mr. Superintendent.
I recommend the board approve the advertisements of the FY22 tentative district summary budget and the appropriate tax notices in accordance with Florida Statute 200.065.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, seconded by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Board members, would you consider a motion to reorder the agenda to move the superintendent search to after the other one so that staff members that are here for those would be free to leave for the evening? All right, we need a motion to move BRD1 after the other items that are right there on the motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That'll take us to CI4, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the agreement with Ingenuity, Inc., effective August 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, and authorize the superintendent or designee to sign all documents and contracts related to the terms and conditions which are required for implementation.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, seconded by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. FMPA2.
FMPA2, I recommend the board approve the consultant agreement with Latinos in Action, Inc. for the period of August 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. I think that's a typo, guys. And authorize the superintendent board chair to finalize all signed necessary documents.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, seconded by Ms. Ayala. Any discussion? Ms. Ayala?
Thank you. So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight this fantastic program that I've gotten to see in person and how excited I am about this. I'm really grateful for Latinos in Action and for the partnership that we've established over some time now. Latinos in Action is an organization that enhances our students' personal and cultural assets in our schools and develops the leadership skills of those students as well as their community service, making them lifelong learners and lifelong public servants to their communities. We continue to enjoy a lot of success from this partnership. Our missions align and our students are clearly receiving benefits and thriving. A lot of our Palm Beach County School District LIA students received awards and scholarships this past year for their service, leadership, talent, and academics. 2 of our very own high schools hosted the Latinos in Action National Conference during the pandemic, which was a big feat to put together. And together, LIA and our district have produced a memorable, successful hybrid leadership conference that 6 states around the nation participated in. So I have to thank Dr. Enriquez and his entire team for everything they do in partnership with us for this program that is so dynamic and includes not just Latino students, but all students in understanding their fullest potential. The progress that we have had with them and of each student that's been inspired to learn and to lead through this academic program would not be possible without this partnership. So I know that together we'll continue to provide access to students and empower them to become leaders and empower them to reach out for service opportunities in their communities and their futures and make a better future for themselves and their families. So I can't wait to see the continued results of success from this enhanced partnership. And I want to thank every staff member that worked on putting this together for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ayala. Mrs. Andrews?
And Ms. Ayala said it well. I'm just so proud of this program. It makes the difference, and this is exciting to see this on the agenda. So I think the school board is moving in the great direction with actually providing more access for more students. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. FMT1.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I recommend the board authorize a resolution to issue COP Series 2022A and 2024A to refinance the 2012C and 2014C COP issues.
Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Mrs. McQuinn. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Takes us to P1.
I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mrs. Andrews. Board members, I would like somebody to make a motion, since I can't, to separate the Mrs. Ocampo from this agenda item so she can be voted on separately. Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. So under that motion, go ahead.
Mr. Barbieri, I think the motion really should be to separate the non-reappointment from it because she's not named on it.
Yes.
And then when we vote on it, it's fine to mention her name.
Right.
So my motion is to separate the non-reappointment.
All right. So all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So, Mr. Superintendent, you want to read the recommendation for P1?
Yes, for P1, I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
All right, so now that's the motion on the floor without the renewal of Mrs. Ocampo. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Superintendent, would you read the recommendation that you're making then for the non-renewal of the principal at Atlantic High School?
I don't have that in front of me. We don't have one.
It, on the P1 agenda, she's a number, and the number is for non-renewal for the principal at Atlantic High School. She's what we just pulled off
She's the
the
singular.
agenda.
Let me see.
General Counsel?
Correct, she's been separated out, so the recommendation would be for the non-reappointment of Ms. Ocampo.
So I guess what I'm saying is I recommend the non-reappointment of the contract for Ms. Ocampo.
Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Dr. Robinson. I'd like to discuss it briefly. I don't believe that the punishment fits the offense, and that there should have been a lesser punishment than non-renewal of a longtime principal in this district who's done a fairly good job of being in the schools that she's been assigned to over the years. Mrs. Whitfield?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, yes.
Before we get into the discussion of this item, I just want to caution the board members. There's already threatened litigation with respect to this, so I would caution the board about discussing this matter. If the board is inclined to vote on this is one thing, but my recommendation would be that if it is a question of you need more information, you may want to ask the superintendent to bring it back until such time that you've been briefed and can be provided information outside of this meeting.
What's the status of her contract? I believe she's already off the payroll, and the superintendent suggested that to me, but I believe she's already off the payroll, and if we push this off, you tell us.
Well, if HR can speak to what her current status is there someone from HR who can speak to her current?
Mrs. Ocampo has been non-reappointed. Her 3-year multi-year contract has come to an end.
And it ended, Dr. LaCava, it ended at the end of June? Well, I mean, when does it end?
June 30th.
Okay, so she's effectively off unless something is done. Yes. Mrs. Andrews?
But we have not taken the official action. Tonight is the action, correct? Okay, so that's what we're talking about.
Ms. Burrow?
Thank you, and I have spoken to staff, and I have been briefed, and I will support voting down her non-reappointment.
Any other discussion? Mrs. Whitfield?
I've been having this conversation all week. I still don't know what the reasoning is behind it, and I thought that we weren't supposed to know. So I've been trying not to ask too many inappropriate questions until we receive a lawsuit. So right now my trust is in HR that they've done the appropriate work to make this happen. But right now I would vote to non-reappoint her because I believe in our HR process. But I feel like if you want to bring it back, that's fine. We can have a better discussion, but I would need to be briefed more on it to keep her. Thank you.
Mr. Barbieri?
Yes.
We did the non-reappointment process with the legal team as well, and it was legally sufficient to non-reappoint her, and that's why we moved forward with this.
Understand. I just don't agree with the legal reasoning on that, and that's why I pulled it. I don't think that the punishment fits. I know that the general counsel doesn't want me to say it, but the punishment doesn't fit the offense, in my opinion, based on the information that I have. Mrs. Andrews?
Because everyone hasn't been put in the loop on this. And when it comes to us as a member, we don't know. I mean, I received a call to say a few things, but I mean, I really don't know what happened here. So, I mean, this is the official night for it to be actually approved. And I can't approve anything that I don't truly know all of the answers to. I have read all the comments from people from her school, from her community, and I do know her. She's a longtime employee within the school district of Palm Beach County. So I really want to know what this is before I cast a vote tonight.
Mrs. McQuinn?
This just is a very short answer back because I'm listening to Ms. Bernard. So my question is, was just the regular non-reappointment process followed, or was it for cause?
So, Mrs. McQuinn, just confirm with our legal team, her contract came to an end, her multi-year contract, and the district chose not to renew it.
Thank you. So I want to make sure we all heard that carefully, because some of our comments have leaned another way. And so when I hear the punishment does not fit the crime, I'm hearing there was no punishment.
Mrs. Andrews? I'm sorry, Ms. Burrow. Ms. Burrow was first, then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And so I don't want to sit and wait for a lawsuit to do the right thing. And so I agree with Mr. Barbieri. I won't go into any more details, but I agree that it does not fit. And I don't want to wait until we get sued, and then we have to pay back pay, and then we have to rehire, and I just don't want to go through that process.
Mrs. McQuinn, she was non-renewed for something that the district believes she did that warranted a non-renewal. So it was basically for cause, and this is the way they ended up doing it. It's just non-renewing instead of firing her.
So follow up, but I'm hearing from Dr. LaCava that it was the non-reappointment. I'm hearing from Dr. LaCava that it was a non-reappointment through the non-reappointment process.
It was.
So we're not being, okay, but that's not what I'm hearing you guys say.
General Counsel?
I'll just state, and I think it was stated by Dr. LaCava, that for the non-reappointment process, when the contract comes to its natural end, the superintendent can make a recommendation to either renew the contract or not renew. In this instance, The superintendent is making the recommendation to not renew or not reappoint the contract that is in place. And I think, again, I'll state, if there are questions, and I believe some have stated that they have questions, if there are questions about what happened, additional background that is needed, that's something that can be done. This matter can be asked of the superintendent to be brought back, just as it's past June 30th. This item was brought today. It can be brought to the next meeting, if that is the pleasure of the board.
Mr. Barbieri, I think we should call the question and see if we have the votes at this point.
Superintendent's agreed, he'll pull it off until next week. Dr. Robinson?
So I heard you say the superintendent's going to take it off till our next meeting. Then my request would be that, yes, I'm sorry, yes. Okay, so my request would be then that HR and legal reach out to each board member to schedule to walk us through, because some of the things that I've heard seem to be contrary and are more inflammatory than the things I think Mr. Barbieri has heard. So it'd be good for us to all hear the same thing one at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
So we'll pull it off and we'll bring it back next week. And if legal and HR can get with each board member and run through. And also the principal supervisor as well, who brought the recommendation to me.
That takes us to P2. We voted on P1, correct, Mrs. Ness? Yes, you did. Okay, P2.
P2, I recommend the board approve the personal addendum as submitted. That is P2.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. PG1.
PG1, I recommend the board approve the annual updated Florida Educational Equity Act implementation plan.
Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I just been reminded that on we didn't recognize the employees that had passed away when we were in that section of the agenda. So at this time, we'd like to recognize the 3 employees that have passed away. Rudolph Brown, he was a school police officer. He was born in 1959, passed away recently in 2021. Tina Rittenauer, manager in food service at H.O. Watkins Middle. She was born in 1959 and passed away recently in 2021. And Laurel Tarr, a behavioral physical needs assistant 2, Title I, Palm Springs Elementary. She was born in 1957 and she died recently in 2021. If we could have a moment of silence for those employees and their families, please. Thank you very much. That'll take us to the superintendent's contract. It's BRD1. I recommend the board discuss and take any action as needed to begin the process of expeditiously finding a replacement for the superintendent who tendered his resignation on July 13th, 2021. Go ahead, Mrs. Whitfield.
Well, I guess I should ask what process you guys would like to go through. Should we start talking about interims first?
Yeah, we need a second one. Second was Mrs. Andrews. So we're under discussion. Dr. LaCava, would you and Mr. Mitchell please come back and help us go through this?
I think they want to talk interim first. So, let me take it. Sure.
Who wants to go first on this? Mrs. Whitfield?
So is it all right if I make a motion on who I think we should pick for interim? Is that where we're at? No, we're on the first. All right, go ahead.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I think before we get to the who, I think we need to talk about some of the process questions. If you disagree, just tell me. But so first, the question about, can the interim apply? I think we need to come to some decision about that, if the interim can apply for the permanent position. And I don't know if you want to do this one motion at a time, or what?
Yeah, let's do them one at a time. But Mrs. McQuinn?
So, can I give input at this time about whether the interim can apply for the permanent?
Yeah, but I think we need a motion first
What are
on
we
the floor
talking
so we can discuss it.
Is Dr. Robinson
That
going to
is
make a
correct.
motion?
Okay, so I'll make the motion that the interim be able to apply for the permanent superintendent's position.
There's a second? Second by Mrs. McQuinn. Okay, now we're under discussion.
I would certainly not want to see us not allow an interim to apply. I would like for them to be able to apply.
Other discussion?
You got 4 for that.
Mrs. Andrews?
Just before we go further, I know in the other meeting, we said we wanted to do the interim, so do we need to vote on that?
Sorry.
Of the discussion we had earlier that we wanted to do an interim, do we need to have a vote on that before we start talking about the other stuff? I think we need to vote
On whether,
in this
yeah, on
meeting,
whether
whether
we
we're
even
going
have
to
an
do an
interim.
interim.
I guess that's important. Yeah, so let's pull that motion back and,
Yeah, will.
okay.
So I can do a twofer? Can I do a twofer? So my motion would be that we appoint an interim, and I'm gonna say for the sake of the motion that will start sometime before the start of the school year, and that such interim can apply to be the permanent superintendent.
Okay, we have a second on that motion. Seconded by Ms. Ayala. Discussion. Mrs. McQuinn?
Does that limit us from doing that tonight?
No.
No,
Thank you.
we're
Okay,
before the start of the school year.
thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Got that one, Dr. LaCava. So the next issue then would be,
How long? So I'd like to make a motion that the interim would serve until June 30th, 2022.
motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Mrs. Whitfield, you have discussion?
I think we can say up until that point, but if we find somebody a little bit sooner than that and they're willing to start, I'd be willing to take them sooner than that. But can we just say that at least that hopefully they will stick around until June of 2022? And then if somebody comes earlier, we can, if the process moves faster than that, we can actually have them come a little sooner.
Ms. Brew?
Thank you. I would offer a substitute motion that the interim superintendent serves until the new superintendent, the permanent superintendent begins working. And that does not preclude that person wouldn't be the same one, but until we make a decision and the person is starting.
Okay, so that's a substitute do I need to accept it? I won't accept it. So I'm pretty clear that we need stability. Now, and I guess what I'm trying to do is to create the situation where our expectation would be that the new superintendent will come on at the end of the school year. Things can always change. When the contract gets negotiated with the interim, it's gonna be an exit clause. Every contract on the face of the earth has one, right? And so if some fantabulous person walks up, then we can change things, but I want to set an expectation. I think our schools need it. I think that they just need to know that we're going to be, have some degree of cruise control almost. And so I don't want to do it that way. I'm pretty clear that I think.
I think, Dr. Robinson, the problem is, if you're suggesting there's a provision in the contract that allows us to terminate it early, then if we find somebody, that's exactly what Mrs. Brill was saying. So, I mean, the contract's either going to say he's got a job, he or she has a job until June, whatever, the end of the school year, or it's got contracts got to say in June 3rd or sooner if the board determines or hires a new superintendent in the meantime. My concern would be that we find somebody that's really great that wants to come here, but they don't want to wait, so they'll go to one of the other districts and say, I've got a job opening, I got a job opportunity, LA, in the LA district, they want me now. If you guys will take me, I'd rather come to Palm Beach. So I hate to lose the opportunity to get somebody that applies that's really good, that doesn't want to wait until June to come to us. So,
So I'm sorry, Mayor.
go ahead.
So, yeah, but every contract has an exit clause. So Dr. Fenoy's contract, we expected him to stay. It had an exit clause. I mean, every contract has an exit clause. What I'm saying is to set the expectation. And I hear what you're saying. I understand those words. I don't think that is the state of affairs with superintendents across the country that will happen. But I want stability, so.
Ms. Burrow.
What you want?
Thank you, and I want stability too, but I will not accept us putting a date on it, because again, someone fantastic can come. We can try and see if we can get someone for the end of the year, but I think just saying that we're going to have the interim serve until such time as our new superintendent begins gives us flexibility. I mean, we may not find somebody even by June, who knows? But I don't want to be boxed in. I do want to have stability, and I also don't want to rule out that superstar who may actually land here in Palm Beach County.
Mrs. Andrews.
Yes, Ms. Brill, I can live with that. I just don't want us to rush again. I just remember when we rushed before, and we had lost a whole lot of people, and then we ended up with just that little group that we had, and we didn't have everything that we needed. I just know we do need stability here, and I see us looking at a year. It may be before then, I doubt it, because I work with a lot of these big school districts anyway, so I do believe it's going to take us a year anyway, but I'm open to leaving that there, but I don't want any rush. I just really want to feel that we're going to get the input from our stakeholders. We're going to do this job right this time. It's going to be thorough, and if we're going to really do it the way we say we're going to do it, we're going to need a lot of time to do it. And certainly a star might shoot down to us and say, hey, I've got to have Palm Beach County, and I've got to have Palm Beach County tonight. Okay, we'll jump to that. But I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're not going to eliminate all the pieces of the puzzle so that we can really build the airplane that we truly want for this next superintendent before we just do it.
Yeah, Mrs. Andrews, remember, the board will have the opportunity to approve a timeline, so we can make sure that we factor in all of that time we need. I don't want to rush it either. I just don't want to limit us to, somebody shows up in March and says they want the job, but they don't want to wait till the end of the school year because they want to come here sooner. I just don't want to lose the opportunity. By then, the word will be out that Palm Beach County's looking and somebody may show up. I'm not suggesting we rush the process. I just want us to have the flexibility to move on it if somebody shows up. General Counsel, we can put something in the contract, but it would have to say that the board on, 30 days notice can terminate the interim superintendent without cause, and so if we just, can we put something like that in the
You
contract?
can put some flexible language, and Mr. Littlejohn, can you speak to what we've done possibly with other interim contracts?
If it's the board's pleasure, I think you can put in a date through June 2022 and also have a early termination provision at the option of the board.
Okay. All right, so Dr. Robinson, you okay with that?
What, the
Having
termination?
early termination provision?
Absolutely. So can I, who seconded my motion? You did? Alexander,
Mrs. McQuinn made the motion.
can I amend my motion? Because actually, I would like it to be, instead of June 30th, 2022, the last day of school. Whatever that date is, May something or other, because I don't have a calendar. So is there a second on that one?
Mrs. McQuinn, will you agree to that change in the motion?
Our clarification is that the last student day of school?
Okay.
Well, I'm just simply getting clarification to her motion before I try to
Absolutely.
second her motion.
That's what I intended. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, Ms. Burrow.
Thank you. So, Dr. Robinson, if I was to follow your logic, you're saying that you feel that, and this was in our previous conversations, that superintendents look at a whole school year. You have to remember that most districts around the country don't end in May. they end in June because they start later. So, I'm not comfortable with that language at all. I understand the intent is to try to get through the school year. I am afraid that I do want to make it a very thoughtful process, but I also don't see any problem with us. We can put the parameters in our ad, but I would rather leave it open-ended in terms of a date because state of New York, they may be ending the middle or the end of June. And just because we're ending in May doesn't mean that superintendent's going to abandon their district to come start down here.
So, Mr. Brill, what you're suggesting is the interim would serve until the superintendent's found, whether it's earlier than the end of the school year or later than the end of the school year. Well, that's not the current motion on the floor. Mrs. Andrews?
And once you begin to do the search process, as you said, Mr. Barbieri, the timeline, all that stuff's going to be in there. People will understand. These superintendents are very unique in knowing exactly what's happening around them. So they will know what you're talking about because as we begin to work through the process, they're working through their own process as to what they can do based on their contract. So it can be open-ended, Mrs. Brill, as long as we just know that we're going to be tight on what we're doing.
Ms. Ayala?
I don't believe there should be a time limit on the interim. I think working until we identify who the individual who is permanent is going to be, we can make so that there's a timeline for that identification and the transfer of title. I think that gives us more flexibility with everything that we have to go through with a national search and options in the process. So it's my 2 cents on that.
Is there any other discussion? So the current motion on the floor would be Dr. Robinson's motion to end the interim position on the last day of student enrollment in the school district for the next school year and have a provision in the contract suggested by Mr. Littlejohn that the contract can be terminated earlier if we find a superintendent in the meantime. Mrs. Whitfield.
In that contract, can we also extend if we want to, Mr. Littlejohn?
Well, there's no.
Can we extend it as well, or is it just a provision to terminate early?
Subject to the agreement of both parties.
The parties could always agree to extend. I mean, if you want to write in there that you have some unilateral right to extend, sure.
I don't
you
need
could-
unilateral, but I just would like the option to be able to, what if everything falls apart and we can't find anyone? We may
Well,
need.
the parties could always agree
We could have a
to
provision in the contract that's
extend it for.
mutually agreeable to the parties that
Okay.
contract can be
Well, I
extended.
can live with this. I mean, this is fine.
All right, is everybody okay with that motion then? Okay, we're going to vote. All in favor? Opposed? I'm trying to decide.
Save your tiebreaker for a better vote.
I think there's enough flexibility in Dr. Robinson's motion to allow us to end the contract, and end it earlier if we find someone. So, Ms. Brill?
I still just don't understand why we have to put dates there, because we know what our intent is. And why bother with having to extend or having to shorten it? I mean, if we just put the words in where it's going to be when they begin in their position, it's just so much cleaner than
All right.
going back and extending or.
I'll vote with the other three and against the recommendation, the current motion on the floor. Ms. Brill, you want to make a replacement motion? Motion fails.
I was kind
Turn your microphone on, Ms. Bass. It was Ms.
just wanna-
McQuinn, Ms. Ayala, Mrs. Whitfield, Ms. Brill, and me.
I was a nay, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
5-2?
4-3. Mrs. Whitfield voted in favor of it, Dr. Robinson did, and so did Mrs. Anderson.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Brill.
So my motion would be that, I'm getting tired, sorry, that the term of the interim superintendent shall be until the new superintendent begins in his position. Right, yes, in their new position.
All right, do we have a second on Ms. Brill's motion by Mrs. Whitfield? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That one passed 7-0. Next issue,
The, you want to talk about
Contract.
effective date?
Dr. Robinson, you want to go with the next
To
one?
do the contract.
Yeah, I think if I'm checking this off in the correct order, then my next motion would be that we accelerate the effective date of the superintendent's resignation to be the date that the interim starts.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
Seconded by Mrs. McQuinn. Discussion. Mrs. Whitfield.
I think I should offer an amended motion where it is to end on the date of the new superintendent with an option for consulting should the new superintendent choose, the interim superintendent choose. I really think that they are going to need that option in there, so that would be my amended motion.
Is there a second on Mrs. Whitfield's amendment? Ms. McQuinn, you
Okay,
seconded it?
so with Robert's Rules of Orders, we don't vote on the first one, we're doing another amendment. All right, where are we?
The motion is that the superintendent, Dr. Fenoy's contract would end when the interim takes over. The amendment would be, if somebody seconds the amendment would be that at the option of the interim, they could ask for some additional time with Dr. Fenoy, so Dr. Fenoy would be moved into a consulting type arrangement with the interim until the interim felt that, so we take, we take some consideration of what the interim would like. That's got a second. Okay, discussion? Ms. McQuinn.
Well, I haven't been able to say this yet, and I just have to. We all know that during Dr. Fenoy's time on this board, I have been a very strong supporter of him. So when I advocate for it, and I'm going along with this transition in terms of what an interim would want, although I don't want any confusion about whose voice is whose, but it is not that I don't value Dr. Fenoy's input. Clearly, I have been very supportive. Who knew what he would have to deal with when he came on board? So I just want to make it very clear that I am pleased that he has taken us to where we are. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor? On the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now on the main motion. All in favor? Opposed?
Now they need an
Opposed?
effective date for the-
Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Joe, you got that? You don't think so? Okay, so the original motion was that the interim superintendent, that Dr. Fenoy's contract would end when the interim superintendent starts. The amendment is that Dr. Fenoy's contract would end based on the request from the interim superintendent that Dr. Fenoy stay in a consulting type arrangement until the interim, based on what the interim would like the board to do. That one passed, 7-0. They both passed, yes. Dr. Robinson.
Okay, so I would, I offer a motion that the scope of the search, the search method, the search timeline, the position description, qualification, salary range, and implementation all be postponed until, I don't even know, where are we? Yeah, not tonight. Until our September board meeting.
Okay, Dr. LaCava, did you want to make
No,
a
the only
comment?
thing that I wanted to mention that Mark brought up is that we need an effective date for the start of the interim superintendent.
Just
So we-
hang on, just hang on.
Okay, hang
Okay.
on, very
We'll-
good,
We'll get there eventually
no
tonight.
problem.
All right, so Dr. Robinson has a motion that the September board meeting, the regularly scheduled September board meeting, would be the meeting that we discuss the timeline and adopt the timeline and all that other. You're seconding that motion, Mrs. Andrews? Any discussion on that one? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. You're on a roll, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman? Could I ask for a point of clarity for a minute?
Aye,
Thank
Alan.
you. I wanted two questions. On the motion we passed to allow the interim to select to keep Dr. Fenoy on as a consultant. I'm curious if that's something Dr. Fenoy is even interested in.
Yeah, so it is, when I signed my contract, that language is in there about a transition in the event of an interim. I am more than prepared to do that at the will and pleasure of the interim superintendent. Yes, ma'am.
Second question was, should that power to assign that be with the board or with the interim? That's it.
I think the board will take recommendations from the interim and then make a decision
it.
based on the recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
from the interim. Mrs. Whitfield?
For sure.
Is it time now to pick an interim? All right, I'd like to nominate Mike Burke.
We have a second? Seconded by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Burke is the interim superintendent. Dr. Robinson?
I think we need to put a timeline, a start date on that.
Yep, that's the next thing.
Okay.
And I'd have another recommendation to add to that, that the item be brought back perhaps for next board meeting to allow time to negotiate a contract, so the board can make a motion to that effect as well, and you'll see that.
The motion would bring back his contract at the next board meeting for discussion and adoption by the board,
Yes, as well as an effective date, if you,
as well as the effective date. Ms. Brill?
Thank you, and I think that we do also have to ask Mr. Burke, if he, first of all, if he's willing, and second of all, how much time, if next week, if we were to make it effective next week, if he would be prepared to transition his office to his person who would be acting, who we all know, but she who shall not be named this time.
Yes, I am prepared, and we can pull that off in a week. And whenever it's appropriate, I'd like to thank the board.
So I'm going to
Don't be
follow
so
up.
quick with that, thank you. I don't know if that's a,
Thank you. So
You don't get a musical reference?
I'll follow up with a motion. I'll follow up with a motion that we bring back the contract for our interim superintendent next week, and that our chairman will work with legal to put that together.
we have Dr. Robinson? We have a
if I
second?
may,
I'm seconding, but I would also, yes.
if I may, Chair, I would recommend that the chairman, if that is the pleasure of the board, that work with legal and HR.
Okay, you're okay with that motion? So amended. Okay, she changed that motion. Dr. Robinson?
And to, if I may, add to that motion that, that he would take the interim position effective immediately after board approval.
After board approval, so if it's next Wednesday, it'll be at that time.
General Counsel, you have any issue with how we're doing this?
Immediate, I missed the tail end of that, immediate after the contract? Is that what you said?
What I'm trying to say is if the negotiations take place and it comes to the board next week, the board approves it, boom, he starts immediately.
You can make a motion to that effect, yes.
That's what I tried to do.
Okay, but we have a motion on the floor, I think.
Having to work on that.
Okay, so will you agree to that? Okay, so Carol, you have that? Okay, so whoever seconded the motion, Ms. Brill's motion, do you agree to the modification? Oh, Dr. Robinson was the one, okay. Go ahead, Mrs. McQuinn.
Going to Ms. Bernard, though, she did say, I don't know if we got it in there, that general counsel and HR would be working together. Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
They just did.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0.
We're good.
Mr. Burke, you would like to make a few comments before we move on here?
I would, yes. I would like to thank the board for entrusting me with this responsibility. I am honored, and I promise I will work hard to make you proud of this appointment. I'd also like to thank Dr. Fenoy. He shouldered a huge responsibility in guiding our school district through the most challenging times in modern history. And I always appreciate that. I know it was tough. You know, the strength of our school district is our people, It's our dedicated teachers, school administrators, bus drivers, custodians, food service workers, police officers, maintenance crews, and I could go on and on. We've got in a full list of support staff, and they always rise to the challenge. I think they proved that last year with the pandemic, opening our schools in the midst of all that, and it's going to take a concerted effort again this year to meet the heightened needs of our students. Coming off, the pandemic's still going, but we know with the full return to brick and mortar, the needs of our kids are great. Let me just check. I did have some notes. I thought I had it memorized, but anyway, I am excited to work with all of our colleagues, 23,000 strong, to move this district forward and to make our schools a place where all students feel welcome and have the opportunity to pursue their dreams. I know this is a tough job. I wouldn't be able to do it without the support of my beautiful wife, Kristen, and our 3 children. Our children are grown now, and I feel like I'm in a good point in my career to take on this challenge. And I just look forward to working with the whole team. And once again, I'd just like to thank the board for your trust and support.
Thank you. Ms. Brill, then Mrs. Andrews, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Burke, for all the years that I've come to know you, that you've sat through these meetings and are still willing to step up into that position. I think that says something to your character. And just a point of personal privilege, I want to once again thank Dr. Fenoy, because his leadership has been very strong and steady. And he does have a vested interest in our continued success, because his little babies are going to continue to be students in our district. So I know that you two will work well together. I'm going to miss my meetings with Dr. Fenoy, because I want to thank him again for getting us through such a rough period of time. So thank you.
Mrs. Andrews? Certainly, Dr.
Well, I just want to say first, congratulations, Mike, and to the whole team. It's going to be really great to be a regular citizen. And, I get to come to the meetings and voice my opinion without the filters of my bosses being next to me. But more importantly, I just ask you, Mike, and the rest of the team, both of my babies will be going to school, and so I just ask that you take care of them. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and congratulations, Mr. Burke. We've been together a long time. I was your wife's teacher, so I know you, and we know each other well. So it's great to see you in this position, but I want to say that we're doing well here in the School District of Palm Beach County. We had about 4 great names of people, and I'm excited to see you here in this position. But I wanted to tell you something that just happened right before the meeting. I was very pleased to see the board unified on your selection. So this is something that we have to continue to do as we move forward for our permanent superintendent. I like this collaboration that I saw here tonight, and we're all on the same page. But I got this email from Mr. Oswald, and I just wanted to read it because I think the team out there, it takes more than just Mr. Burke. We know who you are, and we know your hard work ethic and that you're going to do the best for our children. But it takes all those people sitting behind you, Mr. Burke, and we know how great they are because they do good work. But I received this email from Mr. Oswald, and I just want to read it because I think we got superstar people everywhere. And he said, good afternoon, board members. He said, I know the most important decision for the board is hiring for the superintendent position. I would like to provide my support for Mr. Mike Burke in the position. Mr. Burke has an outstanding track record with the school district. He is trusted and an honest employee of the school district and will lead us well during the transition. And it said, thank you, Mr. Oswald. And I thank Mr. Oswald and I thank the team, the whole team back there, for standing with Mr. Burke, because we're going to move this district, and I'm pretty happy tonight.
Yes. I'm just so glad you shared that, and it means so much to me. Mr. Oswald's a class act, and I think it's no secret that my strength is on the finance and operations and the business side of the district, and it's going to take all of us, our whole team here, working together, and I'm very fortunate to have these colleagues, and anyway, thank you.
Mr. Burke, don't leave yet. Mrs. Whitfield, then Mrs. McQuinn.
Thank you. Well, let me just first of all say thank you so much, Mr. Burke, for stepping up. I truly love you guys. Everybody who's willing to do this job, it just means so much to me. Huge thank you to Mr. Oswald for that email. It just fills my heart. You guys, I feel like we're all in a foxhole sometimes, and y'all are really there for us and support us so much. So in my tradition of picking a song for the superintendent, I got you one. Let's see if we can hear it. Hold on. It went away. I know, it's an awful song. I love it. I'm not really good at music, but I really, really think this is good.
Thanks.
Mrs. McQuinn?
It was
Thank
simply
you.
to read Mr. Oswald's email, which was already done for me, and thank you, Mr. Oswald. That made this easier. Thank you.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge the other people in this room who I know I've spoken to a couple who made it very clear to me that they either chose not to want to take the position because they cared about the stability, and had also said that if they didn't get the position, that they were going to do everything they could to assist and make sure we continue on this track. So we have, Dr. Fenoy put together a great team here, and everybody in this room has pledged that they're going to work together. So I want to acknowledge all of you and thank you all for your very hard work for the benefit of our students and our employees. So thank you.
All right. Ms. Ayala?
Congratulations, Mike, and thank you for stepping up at a time when our district really needs steady leadership. I want to echo some sentiments and thank anyone who was willing to do that. Dr. Licata, Mr. Oswald, all of you for steady leadership, recognition of your role in our continued success. We can't do it without you, and I'm excited for the future of the district and for some time to get to know you a little better, Mr. Burke, in this role. And thank you, everyone, for just wanting to stay committed during a time when public education is getting beat up left and right, and stay in the fight and do what's best for kids, who are our #1 priority. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Burke, I'd like to throw in my congratulations. You know, I've always been amazed at the fact that you can balance a $3.8 billion budget and we still, it must be a monumental task to do that. And you've done it great, and all of our outside audits have never found any findings. So, I mean, it's just, and you've won all kinds of awards for that. When I thought about who is best suited to be the interim in the district right now, your name came to mind first because although you are heavy on the operations side, I don't think there's any decisions ever made on the academic side that you're not part of those meetings also, because you have the checkbook. So I would think that, whether they're academic meetings or they're operations meetings, that you're involved with those meetings. So when I was trying to think who best has in the district at this point, has the knowledge to do both the academic side and the operations side, and I understand you'll have to have the academic. We have an excellent academic team with Mr. Tierney and Mr. Oswald and Dr. Sheffield, and I'll probably miss somebody and then get chewed out tomorrow. But there's an excellent academic team here that you'll rely on. But I just believe with your experience, all the years you've been CFO, you've been COO, you've been the chief financial officer for years, and won all kinds of awards for the work that you've helped keep this district solvent. And so I think you'll do a great job for us until we find our next superintendent, who may be you. But
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, board members, we have 4 discussion items we have to
Mr.
get to.
Barbieri, I think we should just say a huge thank you to Heather Knust, too, because she's going to be taking over Mike's job. And so big thank you to her for stepping up into that work, taking over some of the heavy lift during your time.
I have a strong finance team that makes it possible for me to kind of step out of that role for a while and do this. It's an exciting time. I'm excited about the stimulus funds, the ESSER dollars. We actually now have an opportunity to do some great things with those dollars, and look forward to the challenge. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Board discussion item BD1. Ms. Ayala.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I also want to thank Dr. Diaz and Dr. Samore from the Hispanic Education Coalition who came and thanked me for putting this on. It really was just curiosity and wanting to circle back to a process that we're in the middle of now with our strategic plan. When this document was brought to my attention when I came on, since I obviously was not on the board at the time of it being conducted, we found clear inequities, right, that they listed that exist in our district. And I think as a board, we've collectively decided that a priority for us moving forward is how we address those inequities and begin to make changes in academic achievements for our students who are left behind and for students of color. So I wanted to bring this up to ask, how, when this study was done to now, what things have been implemented from the recommendations provided by this study. If someone, the superintendent or a staff member could speak to that, Mr. Superintendent, that'd be great. And then just what we're thinking of using this for in terms of our current strategic plans, as I think it's really valuable.
Well, this, even though the study was done prior to me coming as the COO, it's a valuable instrument for us to use. I started reading it again last night after I saw your discussion item. It seems that the most appropriate vehicle for addressing these important issues is the strategic plan. You have copies of the draft strategic plan. The team worked diligently. It is ready to be presented to you next week. Definitely look at page 5. I want you to pay attention to page 5 where the NYU equity audit is referenced. While we have focused our efforts on the highlighted findings, we recognize the need to continue to improve in these areas, and we have structured our draft plan accordingly. So what that leads me to this question, however, in light of my resignation, the appointment of a new superintendent, I would like to know what the board's wishes are on voting on the adoption of the strategic plan next week when we can start relooking at this NYU study. So I just kind of put that out to the board on whether or not you would like me to bring the strategic plan forward next week for adoption or for vote by the board, or I'd just like to hear your will and pleasure, that's all.
Mr. Superintendent, if I may first, board members, we've got a lot on our plate with the opening of school in a couple weeks. If we can push this off for a little, I'm not suggesting we forget about it, but let's push it off for a while until we have an opportunity to spend the time we need on that, because there's just not enough time to get everything that's important done when we're opening the school system back up in a couple weeks. Mrs. Andrews?
I agree with that, Mr. Barbieri, and I thank Mrs. Ayala for bringing this item up, because we really do need to have this in conjunction with our strategic plan. But I was traveling just recently, and I had a chance to read thoroughly each one of the focus groups, and most of them talked about the New York University equity audit, and they had really some concerns. All those groups, we talked to a lot of different groups, and they really do want us to go back and look at that and make sure it's embedded so that we do the things that we said we were going to do. This is not just a lightweighted document. This was an audit of us, okay? And the people are saying you didn't do what you said you were going to do with that, and they want that included in the strategic plan to make sure that we answer those questions and get busy and correct those deficiencies that were brought up in the audit. So it was all over the focus groups comments as to why hadn't we done what we needed to do, and the suggestion that we get busy with it. But I do agree that we are really busy right now, and so I do think that a little time away from this before making a decision is good, Mr. Barbieri.
Whitfield?
Thank you. I just want to say we are always busy. There's always something happening. There's always a crisis. Something else is already going on every minute, and every time I think that we're about to get out of whatever thing we're in, we end up in another thing. So I personally don't want to lose the progress we've made with the strategic plan. I'd be fine with putting it off until after school is started, before we have our next meeting on it. But I mean, the work that Kathy Villavicencio has done with the strategic planning team over this past year is valuable. And we've gotten focus groups. I think she's done, I can't even imagine, like 60-something focus groups during this time. I think we should respect that work that's been done and not put the strategic plan off much more than into the fall. It very much concerns me. As far as the NYU audit, I'm right there with you, Ms. Ayala. I was very proud when we did the audit. The suggestions that came out of it meant a lot to me. So I would love to see us incorporating more of that in there. Hopefully we are incorporating some things already, but I do think a second look at it would be great. Some of those things are still going on, and so we really do need to make sure that we do what we said we would do on that. But I would like to at least plan for the strategic plan information to be brought back after the first of school. Thanks.
Mrs. Andrews?
I do want us to take time and talk about what the focus group said. I mean, I don't want it to be just an agenda item and we're doing a major meeting and we're just approving this. We really need to delve into it. When I had that time to read all those comments the focus group had said about us and what we keep saying we're going to do and we don't do it, we need to have a concrete amount of time to go through some of those discussions that came to us from our stakeholders. These are the ones, we're talking about the superintendent search. These are the people that are telling us what we need to be doing, what we said we were going to do and we didn't do it, and now we're saying we're going to do something else. We need to go through those, and I don't want it to be just an agenda item and then we get ready to approve it. We need to have some discussions, and then maybe we come back and approve it when we're ready, but I don't want us to rush to do it if we're, and I know we're busy all the time, Ms. Whitfield, but I think we need to stop and slow down and take time to kind of understand what we're doing and not just saying we got the strategic plan, let's pass it and move on. We had a lot of discussions about where we were going to go with the strategic plan and a lot of comments. So we need to go back and digest that and take the time. I think you almost need to kind of workshop before you're talking about passing it, you know, coming back to bring it to the board to approve it.
Dr. Robinson, then Mrs. McQuinn.
Thank you. I agree. I remember the Council of Great City Schools said that the strategic plan is the superintendent's implementation plan. It is almost like the guiding document of the board's vision in conjunction with the leadership team on how, where we go. And then, kind of the intent is that we step back and watch them take off, right? So, I think that we should slow that down, and actually the next discussion item is relevant to that. The other thing is, I think that there's this impression that soon as we, and this is in the community, as soon as we approve the strategic plan, then all the priorities in schools will change. And it's just not like that. I think when we approve the strategic plan, I think and I don't know if it's in there already and whatever you were going to bring to us, but what would be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 in terms of change? Because I think that we also need to weigh in on the cadence of change, what we think are priorities for changing first, and whether or not the system just can't, if we think the system can't tolerate that much change that fast, or we think it should move faster. So all that's to say is I agree with Mrs. Andrews that maybe we workshop this in a month or so after the reopening of schools settles, and we can take a deep breath and work through it. So thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, if you're still with us, would you schedule that? If not, Mr. Tierney's got it in his notes there, and he'll make sure that we get it scheduled.
Yes, sir, we'll take care of that for you.
Mrs. McQueen, go ahead.
So I would not have been ready to just say, yeah, we're going ahead with the strategic plan. And I did read, I love strategic plans. So I did read all those. And I think now we do need, I don't know if we need a workshop, but we certainly now need to have discussion to make sure that I feel like there was a step that we missed there after reading all that. I loved the groups we got the feedback. It was very representative. And one thing I would appreciate from staff is to make sure, because I just came on the board when that equity audit was given to us. You know what I'm talking about. So I'd like to see how they are integrated. Now, I didn't read that carefully enough to see that it's integrated or not. We can make that decision. But I would not like to see us go too far into September without doing it, because remember, schools don't have a choice from the state about their school improvement plans, and they are to be looking for guidance from us. So I don't want to see us put it too far into September.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All right, that'll take us to the next item, which is Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So because it appeared to me that the strategic plan process was at least paused, I wanted to bring back up the issue again of the board discussing at some later date, maybe when we have this workshop about the strategic plan, but the portrait of a graduate, because again, it still seems to me, I wish if I could turn back the hands of time, I would have asked that we did the portrait of a graduate first, so we could share what we think we want all of our graduates to, their skills and competencies and experiences, you know, above and beyond what are the graduation requirements. So for example, I would like every student to have had the opportunity to learn to play a musical instrument. And I would like every student to have learned another language. I mean, and I do understand that there's no magic wand to make these things happen right away, but if we can set that vision, that North Star, I think it will help guide some future decisions. So I just ask that as a board that we dream that dream of what we want all of our graduates to, what skill sets and experiences we want them to have.
All right, so we can make that part of the workshop discussion? Okay. All right, the next item is yours. This is Dr. Robinson.
All righty, so here we go. So, all right. So first, let me say this. One of the comments was that I think it was that I referred to the anti-mask parents as ignorant. I have never said such a thing. And I actually appreciate you digging into the issues and speaking your truth. I mean, I just, you know, I do respect that. I think that, and you'd probably be surprised, the overlap of the Venn diagram of what we would agree on, but other things we interpret information differently. So this might be a bit much. I need to get this off my chest, so I can leave it on the table. So this past school year has been hellish. In the face of the pandemic, we moved to virtual-only education in 2 weeks, then created a simultaneous teaching learning environment with new safety protocols that changed every operation at and related to schools. Despite all this, the educators and school communities of Palm Beach County managed to prevent a drop in the third grade ELA scores, which amazed me, and they are to be praised. I'm also thankful to the Palm Beach County Department of Health, the Healthcare District, the Superintendent's Health Advisory Committee, as well as the other health professionals, families, and community members that pitched in to prevent disaster. So we have vaccinations now to protect against COVID, and life is starting to open up, but there's Delta, as we know. And COVID cases are climbing again. Cases are climbing because of the increased infectiousness of the Delta variant, as well as that we've been letting our guard down. It would be much worse if not for the vaccine. So let me just give you some numbers, because they blow my mind. So this is per COVID Act Now, which is one of the few places I've been able to find that keeps data for the entire pandemic. So as it happened on June 18th, 2020, which is the date that we approved our COVID-19 Emergency Powers Policy 2.3816, the daily new cases in Palm Beach County were 18.2 per 100,000, right? Today is 23.7 per 100,000. So it's higher than when we enacted our emergency COVID policies. On June 18, 2020, the positive test rate was 13.3. On June 24th of this year, it was 4.2. That was good, right? Today, the positive test rate is 12.7%. Almost as high as when we enacted the emergency policies. So everything is not back to normal. It is as bad as it was in June of 2020. We should not let our guard down. Life and quality of life hangs in the balance. Hopes and prayers are not enough. Now, you've heard me say it before. As a physician, I believe we must act in an abundance of caution, because more than 200,000 lives could be negatively impacted if we keep our heads in the sand. As has been well outlined by numerous health and public health experts, we must create and maintain layers of protection, because nothing is 100% effective. We must find a way for students and employees to feel safe and be safe as possible. I realize there are obstacles. I realize it's not easy, But you know, if you needed surgery and your surgeon decided after 2 hours that their feet hurt when it actually takes 4 hours to complete the surgery, what would you say? So my quote for the day is from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "The true measure of a man is not how he behaves in moments of comfort and convenience, but how he stands at times of controversy and challenges." I think that applies to women too. So there's 10 layers of protection I want to bring up. I will try to not keep you too long. So first is messaging and education. We need to use our communications resources to use their messaging techniques to teach students and other members of the communities that we're still in a pandemic. So take your precautions. To stay at home if you're sick, that vaccines are available. I'm not pushing the vaccines on anybody. And then the other topics as, you know, as seem to be fitting. Then, of course, the mask. Now, masks do prevent infection. They're most impactful for source control. And this is an important point, or else I would really agree with the choice perspective. Masks are most impactful for source control, meaning that they prevent an infected person who has on the mask from spreading it to someone else. They also provide some protection for the uninfected mask wearer to keep them from getting it, but they're really more effective at source control. So, you know, I was trying to figure out a way for everybody to have what they wanted, so that people who want to wear masks could have their children wear masks, and if they didn't have to. And somehow that magically turned into this word called segregation. Fine. I'm just trying to figure out how to keep people safe and have people feel that their voice has been heard. So anyway, if you compare it though to driving laws, this issue of source control. So if you don't wear your seatbelt, you put yourself at risk, right? So that's not the correct comparison. It's more like texting while driving, because if you text while driving, you put yourself at risk and others at risk. You're not safe if somebody else is texting while driving, even if you're not. That's the comparison. Next layer, social distancing. So we know this is important. With so many students coming back, we absolutely 6 feet out the window, we know that. But we must do everything possible to maintain 3 feet. And we need to monitor it the way we monitored 6 feet. Additionally, we must provide the option for students to eat breakfast and lunch outdoors whenever the weather allows. And it's not enough to say we will try. We need to work on this the way we worked on 6 feet back in September. Hand washing, of course, you know, we've known that since we were children, right? Hand washing should continue to be encouraged, and we need to make sure we provide what's needed for the frequent hand washing. Improved air quality. So from the recommendations of the Council of Great City Schools, we must document and report to the school board each of the safety measures taken, including but not limited to which schools have the MERV 13, and if we can't do the MERV 13 filters, to follow the recommended options, including but not limited to operating return air systems with 100% outside air, portable HEPA filtration units, and consider the UV treatment of air. Testing. In addition to continuing testing of symptomatic students by school nurses with parental consent, we must ensure that employees can be tested with as little delay and disruption as possible. We must also resurrect the effort to make regular screening testing available to members of the community. Contact tracing. This remains critically important, and I thank the Department of Health for their work in this area. To expand the effectiveness of this important follow-up public health measure, the school district could work with Health Council of Southeast Florida and others to provide training opportunities for our recent high school graduates to become community health workers. Not only would this increase the effectiveness of contact tracing, but it might actually be a pipeline to future medical professionals. The vaccine. Research shows that the most important step to decrease COVID transmission in schools is to vaccinate the adults. However, vaccines are truly medical therapeutics that break the protective skin barrier. I would not ever mandate COVID vaccines for anybody, but I do want to educate people, and I do want people to evaluate their own personal benefit risk equation. But that, it's not for me to say that they should or must have a vaccine. We must continue, though, to work with Healthcare District and Department of Health to make vaccines very easily available and accessible to all eligible members of the school community that want it. The monoclonal antibody cocktail. So to expand on the work that the school district and United Health arranged, we should work with Department of Health, Healthcare District, Palm Beach County, and the Palm Beach County and T. Leroy Jefferson medical societies, as well as insurance providers, to make the monoclonal antibody cocktail available to all that meet the criteria and desire to have this potentially life-saving therapy. One model program exists in Imperial County, California. So we need to use our important positioning in this community to help save lives. Now, I'm going to say this. Studies on ivermectin are really pretty convincing, but as a licensed physician, I cannot broadly promote off-label use of any medication, so I didn't really say that. Okay, the last thing is wastewater surveillance. As an added layer of monitoring to prevent the spread of illness, we should work with other county entities to look at a wastewater monitoring system that was described very clearly in the June 18th Time magazine. So now, I am clear that all of these recommendations do not and should not fall on the shoulders of the school district alone, but we have influence, and we are part of this public health network, whether we like it or not. So what can we do? So I agree with the American Academy of Pediatrics statements stressing that our, quote, school plan should start with the goal of keeping students safe and physically present in school. In addition to encouraging vaccines, AAP has stated clearly that, quote, all students older than 2 years and all school staff should wear masks at school unless medical or developmental conditions prohibit use. Now, the Florida Department of Education website says the FDOE is working closely with the Florida Department of Health and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to monitor COVID-19 and is actively working to ensure that the most up-to-date guidance is quickly and accurately disseminated. FDOE understands that concerns about health and safety are paramount for all education communities. In response to such concerns, we encourage you to access up-to-date information and resources, and they give you the FDOH and CDC's websites. They also say school districts and colleges should work directly with their local county health departments to establish protocols to reopen Florida's educational institutions, control the spread of COVID-19, and educate the public on prevention. Yes, that's what I'm asking. So here's my request. So in addition to all the things that I've listed in terms of messaging and so forth, I ask that we follow the recommendations of the Florida Department of Health, CDC, and AAP to work with our local county health department to institute COVID safety plans and establish protocols for the start of the school year. And I ask that legal determine if the current health crisis meets the criteria for an emergency policy with regards to COVID. One, if so, that emergency policy be developed with input from our local county health department, as per Department of Education, that is in alignment with the CDC and AAP recommendations. If its legal determines it does not meet the criteria for emergency, I ask that the superintendent reinstate COVID protocols that were recently suspended, and we proceed to update our policy under the usual timelines. And that is my attempt to try to help. Thank you.
Mrs. McQuinn, then Ms. Ayala.
I think that several of us last week or the week before met individually at the request of a group of parents that included healthcare professionals, and their wish was for universal masking. But they had some pieces that came out of that I talked to Dr. Fenoy about, and some of you saw I sent a couple of board questions in. So if I could just bring two of those up, because Dr. Fenoy said that he would address one of them. And one of their questions was, were schools allowed, could parents provide, really is what they said, but we know that becomes an equity issue. All can't do that. The portable HEPA filters in classrooms. So I know that Dr. Fenoy said that he would address that.
Yeah, so Mr. Burke and Wanda Paul and I talked earlier this week. So we're in the process of purchasing for the entire district.
Hooray. And then just one more follow-up from that meeting. I mean, there was a lot more, but I tried to be good about this. Well, actually, two. So that's handled. The other piece is they are advocating being able to eat outdoors. And I read somewhere, I don't know if it was public or to us, but that it was a school-centered decision. I'm telling you, principals should not have to make that decision on their own because they are going to create a mess among their teachers. And we can't afford that with our kids. So I'm not asking for a statement about that tonight. I am asking that our schools get very clear direction and that our public know what that direction is. And finally, they just wanted to know, like, I don't even know how we got here tonight. Wasn't aware that we were changing anything. And I have a big star here. They just said, where are we? I didn't know that we had made a decision to do anything differently. Thank you.
Ms. Ayala, then Ms. Brill, and Mrs. Whitfield, and Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleague covered a lot of what I wanted to ask. Basically, I wanted to understand what layers, the layered approach that's recommended by the CDC. Can the superintendent or staff walk us through what layers we have in place or how we're planning to have in place going into the school year?
Yes, ma'am. Some of that information is going to be shared with you tomorrow, and then we'll be available to walk you through it individually.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you, and I'm just asking for some clarification. All of you received the response to my questions. I did put out 2 questions about the HEPA filters and the option to eat outdoors. And so the response that I received from Ms. Paul is that, as Dr. Fenoy said, and this is where I'm going to need to get clarification, it says the district is working with 2 consultants to determine the best short-term and long-term solutions. As recommended by the consultants, operations is working with purchasing and finance to secure funding and order sufficient numbers of HEPA filtration, and this is it, for school clinics as well as elementary classrooms. And the intent is to have it in place for the start of the school year. So I just want clarification. Is it only for the elementary schools, or are we looking for them for all of our schools?
So this, if I may, Dr. Fenoy, this process is the initial items that we think we're able to deliver before or right at the start of school. We do have consultants working on the short-term solution, which is the portable HEPA filters. The long-term solution is in terms of construction-related things that we can do. And so we have another consultant that's looking at that portion of it. And so we have a definite timeline that we have to be on to utilize the ESSER funds that we intend to use to pay for this. And so, again, you know, I will speak in terms of layers as we try to increase filtration in our schools. So the first phase is purchasing portable HEPA filters. Our sick kids go to the clinics first, and so we want to make sure we provide that for the clinics. Then we want to be able to provide it for the elementary schools or the kids that are unvaccinated in the elementary schools or we don't have a vaccine. And then the other layer of it or phase of it is the structural part of it that impacts our HVAC system. As we're replacing new units, we want to make sure that we're able to upgrade those systems in a way that prepares us if we ever have another pandemic in the future, that the school district is prepared for that. So I hope that answers your question, but this is not a one-size-fits-all situation. And so we're doing what we can for the start of school. And then this will be a 3-year project that we want to impact all schools. So it's not an easy answer initially, but I think we can get there. And it's really nice to have money to be able to afford to do it. So we're very fortunate in our district.
Mrs. Whitfield and Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First, on your list, Dr. Robinson, you mentioned communications, and I think that that is really key in this time. I think we need to over-communicate, if anything, on what is it going to look like when we go back to school. Because I think, the families that have been coming to us are concerned because they don't know what the situation is going to be. And obviously, things change. I get that we have to be somewhat flexible, but as much as we know, I think we should over-communicate. Secondly, I had a couple of things that I wanted to mention. One idea to help the families out who are nervous and are afraid for their students. One concern that I've heard is about choice, and some people are afraid to lose their spot in a school that they may have just been assigned to. So I'd like us to consider letting, just for the first half of the school year, if a student is been accepted to their choice dream program, that if they choose not to attend, that we facilitate that for them and allow them to come in January. I know this would be a hit for us as far as financially, but I think this is one way we could be really respectful of people who choose to take their children and put them in virtual school. We could still hold that space for them, and I think this should only be available for people 12 and under who can't get the vaccine or unable to get the vaccine. I think mostly because when you get into the older ages, obviously they can get a vaccine if they want to, but there's more requirements for choice at that level, and so it can get more difficult to make that up. But the elementary and early middle school years, we should be able to accommodate that from my small conversations with choice. So I'd love to consider that. And secondly, I'm wondering if it's possible for the families who choose to wear a mask, that if they want to talk to their teacher and ask their teacher for the very small children if they say, we would like you to help Johnny and Sue, to encourage them to keep their mask on because the parent chose that, that we would see if we could encourage that as a school district. I just feel like we want to make those families who do choose to send their children back, but are concerned, we give them those options so that, they feel that real support from us. So not mandating the masks, but saying that if they do come back, that they would have that opportunity. So those are two things I really would like us to consider to really support people who choose to come back but are very concerned right now.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I really appreciate hearing the things that Ms. Paul is going to do, especially with helping us to get to the next level. I'm still kind of concerned about the distancing, the 3 feet, and how we get that piece done. But I think we're working on it with the eating outside. I think those kinds of things are good. But I think when I hear parents come to this microphone and they're feeling like they can't believe anything we say. Thank you, Dr. Robinson, for bringing all your comments up. But I just want to be clear, and Dr. Fanoa, you're sitting here. I've been out in the community talking about your time to shine school board meeting from June the 23rd, about the school reopening updates, which was pretty thorough. And parents do understand this, especially speaking at education advisory committees and other groups. And now we're getting another one probably tomorrow. Is that correct, Dr. Fanoy? And so I think when people are sitting here, I really want them to know I don't know of anything too much different from the optional piece that was in here, that it would be optional for masks in the schools as well as on the bus. And parents are asking those questions everywhere, not just at these meetings. And so when we send this out tomorrow, I just really want to make sure that when we send it to parents, let's send it to educational advisory groups and some of the cities. Everybody needs to know what's going on for the opening of school. And it looks like we don't have a whole lot of changes. We're trying to make it better for our students so everybody can feel comfortable. I know there are a lot of students and their parents worried about it, but we heard about choice tonight. We heard about the options, and this is what we said we were going to do. And so I don't know of anything that's different, Ms. McQuinn. As I'm sitting here tonight listening to all these parents, I was surprised when they had called me and asked me, well, are we doing something different? And I don't know of anything different. I know what has been brought to my attention based on what the superintendent said. I'm sorry I don't have the sheet tonight to say when I can read this. It's the same thing, but it sounds like nothing has changed here. So I just want to make sure, I hear you, Dr. Robinson, but it looks like this is where we are based on what you're doing tomorrow, Dr. Fenoy. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to make sure parents hear that, because they're saying, well, no, that's not correct, Ms. Andrews. Somebody's going to change their minds. And so when Dr. Fenoy told me this week, no, it's similar to what you already have, of what you've been out in the community saying, and I have not, there are no other changes in the decisions. And one other thing I want to bring up that's not in here, I'm still worried about the ESC children. I still work with parents who are concerned where their children, based on their IEP, may not be able to go back to brick and mortar. And so I don't know if we have a plan for them. I know that we sent the paperwork out saying that they could go to Palm Beach virtual or Florida virtual, but based on their IEPs, that might not be suitable. And I'm saying it again here tonight. I've spoken to Mr. Tierney and others. I worry about that. I was hoping with Ron LaFace and his position at one of the board meetings that he was going to work on seeing if we could actually get some approvals, because we were a high-performing district. But from Dr. Fenoy's mouth just the other day, that we're not going to get that. So, Dr. Fenoy, can you talk about the ESC piece for a minute, please, for the parents that's listening?
Yes, ma'am. We were in communication with the Chancellor's office, and because we were a high-performing district, we requested, Dr. Sheffield submitted a formal request. They contacted us last Thursday, and told us that they would not be granting any requests in the state of Florida for different modalities, and so we moved forward. Dr. Sheffield and the team and Mr. Oswald have been working with my special education department and for alternatives, and so they're ready to go.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say to the parents too, and I spoke to Dr. Fenoy about this, and I've been checking with other school boards from across the state. I know that we're under the auspices of the governor and the Commissioner of Education, and whatever we're going to get tomorrow, I think it tags into what we've been actually been told by the Commissioner of Education, that we have to get back to a normal school setting. Dr. Fenoy, can you talk about that a minute, please?
I don't know if there's anything else really to add than what you said. Yeah, yes, that's all I can really say to that.
Okay.
Dr. Robinson, then Ms. Brill.
Well, okay, I'll defer to Ms. Brill, and I'll come back.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to something that Ms. Whitfield had recommended, because I'm just not understanding how it's practicable, and that is with regard to the choice program seats. I don't know, and we'll defer to the superintendent for some feedback, and I know that Mr. Bogus is here. I don't personally know how you could hold the seats for a whole semester when you have wait lists for some programs. And then if some students are able to have their seat held and then start in the choice program in January, and then you have others who are not able to have their seat held and can't go into their program, is it going to be, selective? I mean, will families feel like it's selective enforcement? I want to make sure that we have fair and equal and equitable treatment throughout the district. So I just want to, I got the impression that that Mrs. Whitfield was told that that could be done. And in my mind, I just can't reconcile that, so.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, so I'm not even familiar with what you're discussing at this point.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So, well, Mrs. Whitfield, I appreciate you creatively thinking about how to work through this situation we're in. So let me add this, because a lot of the conversation circles around young people over 12 can get the vaccine. But we cannot assume that there's going to be real uptake in the vaccine in our students. And I'm going to say that when people evaluate their personal benefit risk ratio in terms of the vaccine, there are some legitimate concerns. I mean, I'm just saying. So I don't want us to act like over 12 is everything's good. They had the vaccine. That's not true, right? It is true that under 12, they're unable to get the vaccine at this point, right? So, I mean, but I appreciate you trying to think of solutions, which is what I'm trying to do. So now, you know, I think that when we look at these layers of protection, so the standard, the most common two discussed, of course, are mask and social distancing, right? The thought, though, of children, I hate to say it this way, being normal children, and working together, closely together without mask on, really does concern me. And so my request, again, is that we ask our legal department to determine whether or not it's emergency, but most importantly, follow the recommendations of the Florida Department of Health to work with our local county health department to make recommendations. That's, I mean, you know, I'm pretty clear about how things would work if I had a magic wand, but I'm also clear I'm not in charge of the world. So, but I just want to stress, again, I want to stress where we are with these numbers, okay? Again, June 18, 2020, in Palm Beach County, the daily new case rate was 18.2 per 100,000. Today is 23.7. So if we had all of these protective measures in place then, we should not just turn away. I have COVID fatigue too. I'm tired of this doggone pandemic, right? But we can't put our head in the sand, and especially when we have responsibility over, you know, a couple 100,000 lives, we can impact their well-being, right? So, you know, again, my best idea to provide for as much safety, as many layers as possible, while respecting the parents' rights who don't want their children to wear masks, is to give the principals the authority to do masked or unmasked classrooms if it works for their school community. I'm not trying to mandate that either, right? But we cannot put our head in the sand when these numbers are skyrocketing. June of this year, I wasn't saying anything like that. The numbers were down. I was like prayerful that the numbers would continue to go down. They have not. Okay, so I'm just asking that we address the issue. It doesn't have to be what I think it should be, but doggone it, let's acknowledge the fact that we are still in a pandemic, and we need to make sure that we provide as much safety as possible.
Let's finish up this discussion because we have another one that I want to get to. But the takeaway from this discussion tonight, those people that are sitting here and the people that are going to read about this tomorrow, is that this board is discussing putting a mandatory mask mandate back in place, and we are not discussing that. There was no vote on that tonight, and we are not doing that. I respect your opinion, Dr. Robinson, but I want to make it clear to the public that we have not made a decision to do that. If we can find other ways to protect the children, that's fine, but to suggest to the public that this board is considering putting a mandate back in for masks is the farthest thing from the truth, because I don't hear any of us talking about that. And I just want to make that clear to the public, because tomorrow and next week we'll have another 1,000 people that want to call in here saying that we're voting on putting mask mandates back in, which we are not doing, and it wasn't even on the agenda tonight to vote on it. So,
And Mr. Barbieri, that's why I listed all the layers, okay? If we're not willing to lean into one layer, we damn it need to lean into some of the other ones. I am thrilled to hear about the portable HEPA filters, okay? Thrilled. But let's look at the other ones.
I agree.
right?
I just want to make it absolutely clear that this board is not discussing a mandatory mask mandate for the fall. We are not doing that, so. I'd like to get to the next board discussion item. If we would have listened to all the recorded messages tonight of 2 hours and 40 minutes, it would now be almost 1 a.m. We need to do something about the policy. I'm not suggesting that the people that come here shouldn't have the opportunity to speak with us. I'm not saying that I'm not even suggesting anything close to that. What I'm saying is the recordings were put in place during the pandemic so we can make sure that people that wanted to talk to us felt comfortable talking to us without having to come here. That time has passed. This board cannot get work done. I mean, we got staff sitting here that's going to have to be up in the morning back here because we're on 10-hour days. They're going to be back here. They're probably going to go home and get 5 hours of sleep and be back in here in the morning. It's ridiculous that we have this policy in place that says people can just sit at home and call in. And we all know that this board, honestly, I mean, when we sit here listening to recorded messages for 3 hours, are we really listening after, I mean, we do our best, but I mean, do we really sit here and concentrate on half the time we can't understand what they're saying because of I think we should change the policy to prohibit recorded messages, or at least limit them to the first hour that we get recorded messages. We'll listen to recorded messages, and all of the recorded messages will be attached to the agenda and will be available to the board members to listen to and the public. The other thing we need to do is eliminate comments, public comments at workshops. The workshops, we don't vote on anything. Workshops is our opportunity to have staff tell us what they think we should be considering when we're going to make a decision at a board meeting, at which point the public has the opportunity to speak to us before we discuss and vote at a board meeting. So I think the policy should be changed to do away with public comments at workshops, so that if we can schedule 3 workshops for 3 hours and know that we have a board meeting, we know we're going to get 2 3-hour workshops and not have 2 or 3 hours of public comment. And secondly, we need to do something with these recordings. They're out of control. We keep waiving it every time we have a chance. And we waived 2 hours and 40 minutes tonight of listening to recordings. And like I said, it would be 1 o'clock in the morning if we would have done that. Ms. Brill.
So I partially agree with you, Mr. Barbieri. I do agree that we put the recordings in place because of COVID. And since we are open and people can come in here and can sit in the mask room or the unmasked room, we should go back to having people in person. However, as I recall, I was the one who put in the motion that we agreed on to have speakers at workshops. And that went back to, I remember when we wrote the inclusion policy for the district. And the public was an integral part of it. When we have a workshop, we're not voting on things, but there are people in the public that do have ideas, that do have knowledge that we don't have. I don't recall any workshops other than, I mean, it's, the workshop today on the superintendent search is atypical. We don't normally have that number of people in our meetings, in our workshops. So I don't want to preclude getting comments from the public at our workshops. I think that we are here to serve the public, and that I would still want to welcome them to be involved.
Other discussion? Mrs. Andrews, then Mrs. Whitfield.
And thank you, Mr. Barbieri. I always want to hear the voice of the people, but we started this because of the pandemic. And I think now we are we're going to get this time to shine tomorrow. Everybody's coming back to school. We're asking our children to come back to brick and mortar and giving parents an option as to what they're going to be able to do, whether they're masked or maskless. And so we need people to come on to this board meeting if they want to speak, you know what I'm saying, to come in here, and we have 2 rooms, as Mr. Barbieri said. So I think and everywhere I go, I'm out in the public all the time, very few people. Now, if I want to wear a mask, I can wear a mask, but people are out doing whatever they want to do everywhere they go. And sometimes when I find myself with the mask on, I'm the only one. So everybody needs to start getting back to where we need to go. We're telling the children this is what it's all about as we begin to open school on August the 4th and August the 10th. And I'm out this weekend doing things in the community, and people are ready to move forward. So I think this thing with everybody on the recording, that needs to be changed. We need to stop that.
Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Barbieri, for bringing this back up. I agree with you completely. I think it's disingenuous for us to ask people to leave voicemails that we then suspend at every meeting. So I think if we're not going to have the time to listen to them, because truly I am first one to say that we can't go till 1 a.m. We're already an hour past my bedtime. You know, I have a baby. I'm like, there's only so much I can do. So I think we need to just realize that we're back and people can come, and we'll make every accommodation to have them in the building. And I would like to see them and have them come in and really just, I think we can't continue with this, hours of recorded messages. It's just very difficult. Thank you.
Ms. Ayala.
I agree with you completely. I think that it's important to hear from everyone, but there's the right way and right place and time to have those discussions. And frankly, I think I would be remiss for my third time on the short time on this board if I didn't address the disrespectful manner in which some of the commentary has gone in this discussion today. And I think as board members, as staff, as chiefs, that disrespect is just not acceptable. We can disagree and be respectful because none of us disrespect the public speakers that come in front of us. And so in that vein, I agree with you on the workshop piece too, because there are opportunities to address this in other ways, in other venues, for those thoughts on workshops that we may be having. It actually cuts into the time we have to do the work of the district that we're trying to do. And may I remind the public that these are not full-time jobs. They're not supposed to be. Many of us up here have other full-time jobs and do this as well. And it's a lot, and none of us should be forced to stay here until 1 a.m. multiple times a year. That's just not. Do you all do that at your jobs? Any of you stay at work till 1 a.m.? So
No.
I just want to make sure that it's understood that we work and we're all committed and passionate about what we do here, but we are not subject to certain things that are out of bounds. So I agree with the chairman's comments.
May, please stop out there. You know, we've taken enough abuse tonight from you all. Can you just stop? She's right. I mean, you know, there's some respect that's due to us. I mean, we work hard for all of you. I've been on this board 13 years, and I'm tired of being called all the names you call us every night. And you heard the one guy said, you guys are screwed. You guys, there's no way you can win. And they're absolutely right. There's no way for us to win. You heard the people that said, I don't want to send my kids to school unless everybody has a mask on. Doctors are telling this. And then you guys are telling us that you're going to take your kids out of school because we're a bunch of idiots putting masks on them. What the hell do you expect us to do? Stop beating us up at every meeting. We're trying to do our best. Mrs. McQuinn.
Okay, go to workshops first, because I'm going to talk about the disrespect, and we have never been disrespectful back. And I loved the two children who spoke tonight. One of the principals texted me and said, those were my kids. And even though we don't necessarily, we may or may not agree with their message, I was so proud of them for being prepared and being able to speak publicly. I think I had to be a lot older before I would have had the nerve to do that. I initially voted to, whenever we did it back a few years ago, to have the comment at workshops. However, we often end up without time to talk ourselves and to have staff answer our questions. And since we don't typically vote at workshops, then there's plenty of time for public comment before we would make a vote, and certainly to send us emails. And I know that barring these very difficult situations, that everybody cares about their kids. You want a mask, you don't want a mask. You care equally about your kids, so you're emailing us. But for the most part, they're not overwhelming, and we do read them. So I concur with Mr. Barbieri.
Ms. Brew.
So before we make a decision on the workshops, because I'm thinking back on the meetings, and I don't recall us really having a large number of speakers at our workshops, other than when we've had the controversies that we've been dealing with recently. So I'm going to not be willing to make that change because I do want the input from people, depending on what the subject matter is. There have been workshops that we've had where we've had no speakers. So I do think if it's something important, I just want to be more inclusive of the public. I completely concur that we don't need to have the recorded messages, but I do think it's important that when we're talking about different things, for example, if we have a workshop on ESE and we have parents that come in with information on dyslexia and they speak to us and they share information that we really don't know, I can say that in many cases in these workshops, people have brought things up that I didn't think about. So, you know, I don't want to make decisions in a cocoon. And I think that even though we're not voting, I do appreciate the input that we get from the public at the workshop.
So will the board agree that we will modify, we'll have the administration bring back the modified policy to get rid of recorded messages? We'll keep we'll keep the discussion at this point, a public discussion at the workshops, and we'll see how that works out for us. Obviously, if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, we'll have to revisit it at some other time. Is everybody in agreement we bring the policy back with the recording? Ms. Bernard?
I just want to state that.
I know we can't vote on it tonight, so.
Can't vote on it
yeah.
tonight, but the Office of General Counsel works on the preparations of that policy, and we are in the process of doing that. We're in the process of doing a complete overhaul of the policy because there are a number of sections, not just the section dealing with recordings, but a number of sections that over time the board has indicated that they'd like to see changes to. We are in that process currently. I'm so happy to hear this discussion tonight because this will certainly inform what we bring back to the board. But I would just ask that we be allowed the time to do a complete review of the policy and bring it back to you in total so that we're not going through that elongated.
When you say
policy.
complete review, I don't want this to drag on for another 2 months. So that policy on the recordings, I don't care if we have to do it in 2 different steps. You need to get that policy back to us so we can get it changed, because as the parents get more and more heated, I don't want to tell them to call and make their recordings, and then we turn them off every night. It's not fair to them to think that we're going to listen to them, and then we don't. So we need to get that policy changed so that the public knows if they want to speak to us, they can either come into the meeting or they can send us messages through the email system so that we see the emails. But that policy's got to be brought back to us post haste on that change, at least that change. All right? Mrs. Andrews?
And I know it's time to go, but I do want to say that what we're discussing tonight is happening all across the country at school board meetings, because we're in a pandemic, everybody. We've been in a pandemic, and we're still in it. And parents and community, they want to have their voice. It's a passionate time when a parent is fighting for their child. So we understand that. And we know that it gets impassioned out there when parents are speaking. And we've been listening. We've been getting your emails, your texts. We know what it's all about for you to advocate for your children, because you're the best advocate. So as we kind of wind through this, I think we're at an even point now that you're getting the information from the superintendent tomorrow. I know I'd like this time to shine, and I guess tomorrow when I get the new one, it's going to be even greater in a sense that we're going to be doing more things for the children, and we're getting on back to getting to school. So I hope people leave here tonight to know that we spent the time listening to you and trying to work on what's best for children. And we will continue to listen to parents because you are the best judge of what happens to your children. And the optional pieces that the superintendent has put in place, as I said before, I'm feeling comfortable with that. And the other pieces of trying to keep the children safe once they get to school and continuing to modify how we can keep them safe once they get into the school. But the biggest question right now is making sure parents have a choice. And we're leaving here tonight knowing that that's coming out tomorrow and nothing changed tonight. So thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, we need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. McQuinn, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion, all in favor, opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.